Imagine waking up one day to find that a foreign government has frozen nearly $15 billion of your assets, stripped away your management team, and demanded you surrender 99% of your company for just one symbolic share. Sounds like something out of a geopolitical thriller, right? But this isn't fiction. This is exactly what happened to a Chinese-owned semiconductor company in the Netherlands. And now, Beijing has drawn a line in the sand. Fix this within 6 months, or face an $18 billion arbitration battle that could reshape how the world views European investment security forever. Welcome back. If you care about the future of global supply chains, tech geopolitics, or simply understanding how economic warfare actually plays out in real time, you're going to want to stay for this one. Act 1. The forgotten player in the chip war. When we talk about restrictions targeting China's semiconductor industry, one name dominates the conversation: the United States. And rightfully so. Washington has spent years constructing an elaborate system of export controls, technology blacklists, and diplomatic pressure campaigns designed to limit Beijing's access to advanced chip-making capabilities. American officials have traveled the globe, urging allies to join what they call a necessary defense of national security. But here's what often gets overlooked in that narrative. Europe isn't just following America's lead anymore. It's writing its own playbook. Over the past several years, European nations have quietly but systematically tightened their grip on semiconductor exports to China. The language is always carefully chosen. Compliance reviews, security assessments, updated technology export frameworks. It all sounds perfectly bureaucratic, almost boring. And that's precisely the point. These measures are designed to appear routine, procedural, legitimate. But ask the companies caught in the crossfire, and you'll hear a very different story. Supply agreements terminated without warning, partnerships frozen mid-negotiation, years of planning evaporating overnight. And at the center of this unfolding drama stands one company that's become the poster child for what happens when economic policy collides with geopolitical anxiety: Nexperia. Act 2. The rise of an unlikely giant. To understand why this matters, we need to rewind the clock. Nexperia didn't start as a Chinese company. In fact, its roots trace back to one of Europe's most respected semiconductor manufacturers, NXP. For years, it operated as a division within NXP, specializing in components that don't make headlines: discrete semiconductors, automotive-grade power chips, the kind of unglamorous technology that keeps modern vehicles and industrial equipment running smoothly. These weren't cutting-edge processors. They weren't AI accelerators or 5-nanometer wonder chips. But they were profitable, extremely profitable. They formed one of NXP's most reliable revenue streams. Then in 2016, everything changed. Qualcomm announced plans to acquire NXP in a massive consolidation move. But European antitrust regulators had concerns. As a condition for approving the merger, they required NXP to divest this particular business unit, to sell it off and let it operate independently. And so Nexperia was born as a standalone entity. But there was a problem. Without the backing of its parent company, the newly independent operation struggled. Profitability vanished. Losses mounted. Enter China. In 2017, a Chinese consortium led by Wingtech Technology saw an opportunity. Over 2 stages, they completed the acquisition of Nexperia for approximately $3.9 billion. And here's the fascinating part. At the time, nobody objected. There were no emergency security reviews, no political outcry, no front-page investigations questioning Chinese intentions. The deal went through as what it appeared to be: a straightforward market transaction. Chinese capital rescuing a struggling European business. What happened next surprised many observers. Rather than gutting the company or relocating everything to China, Wingtech largely preserved Nexperia's existing structure. Research and development facilities remained in Europe. Manufacturing bases stayed operational. The management team was kept predominantly local, with Europeans running day-to-day operations. But the strategy shifted. With Chinese investment fueling expansion, Nexperia refocused on what it did best: producing the essential, often overlooked chips that modern vehicles absolutely cannot function without. We're talking about components used in power management systems, industrial controls, automotive electronics, the invisible infrastructure of the digital age. Within just a few years, the turnaround was remarkable. Nexperia went from sustained losses back to profitability. Its customer list read like a who's who of global automotive and industrial giants: Bosch, Continental, ZF, Denso. These weren't small-scale contracts. These were multi-year supply agreements worth billions. For Europe, the arrangement seemed ideal. Thousands of local jobs preserved, European expertise retained, tax revenue continuing to flow. For China, it represented something equally valuable: proof that Chinese companies could successfully integrate into global supply chains, operate according to international standards, and deliver results that benefited everyone involved. It was, by almost any measure, a textbook example of mutually beneficial cross-border investment. So what went wrong? Act 3. The seizure that shocked the business world. September 30th, 2025. That's the date that changed everything. On that day, the Dutch government issued what it called a ministerial order. The language was technical, the justification familiar: national security and economic security concerns. But the actions that followed were anything but routine. According to official documents, the Dutch government moved to freeze 30 separate Nexperia legal entities scattered across the globe, representing a combined asset value of approximately $14.7 billion. The freeze would last 1 year, authorities announced. But that was just the beginning. The company's management authority was effectively gutted. Every major decision, every personnel change, every strategic move now required approval from Dutch government officials. And the government reserved the right not just to review these decisions, but to veto them outright. Then came the truly extraordinary part. The Chinese management team, including Nexperia's CEO, who had been dispatched by Wingtech, was forcibly removed from operational control, suspended, sidelined, cut out of the company they had been running. And finally, the demand that left many international observers stunned. The Netherlands put forward a restructuring plan requiring the Chinese owners to surrender 99% of their shares. They could keep exactly 1 share, a symbolic token, nothing more. Let's be clear about what this means. A private company, lawfully acquired through a transparent market transaction approved by regulators, was now being forcibly seized by a government that had previously sanctioned the very same ownership structure. To many observers, and not just in China, this didn't look like regulation. It looked like expropriation. Beijing's response was swift and surgical. Just 3 days after the Dutch announcement, Chinese regulators issued their own order, an immediate export ban. Nexperia's production facilities operating within China, which critically account for roughly 70% of the company's total manufacturing capacity, were prohibited from shipping any products overseas. Think about what this meant in practical terms. The Netherlands had just seized control of a company whose actual production capability was overwhelmingly located in China. They now technically owned the brand, the customer contracts, the intellectual property. But they couldn't manufacture the products those contracts required. It was the economic equivalent of seizing someone's car while they keep the keys, and the implications cascaded immediately. Nexperia derives approximately 60% of its revenue from the automotive sector. That's roughly $8.8 billion annually. Its customer list includes some of Europe's largest automotive suppliers, companies that depend on Nexperia's components to keep their own production lines running. But now, new orders couldn't be fulfilled. Long-term contracts faced indefinite delays. In several cases, partnerships were terminated outright. For major European automakers, this wasn't an abstract trade dispute. This was an immediate operational crisis. Entire production lines faced the very real threat of shutdown. And unlike consumer electronics, where you might substitute one component for another, automotive supply chains are notoriously inflexible. When a specific chip is designed into a vehicle's electrical system, you can't just swap it out for a competitor's product without months of re-engineering and recertification. The pressure mounted quickly. Reports emerged of major automotive manufacturers jointly lobbying the Dutch government, demanding urgent resolution. The message was blunt. If Nexperia's supply chain remains disrupted, we shut down factories. And when factories shut down, jobs disappear. Meanwhile, Beijing wasn't finished. In December 2025, China formalized its position with an ultimatum: restore Wingtech's lawful control of Nexperia within 6 months, or face international arbitration proceedings seeking up to $18 billion in damages. When that $18 billion figure first appeared in headlines, many people's initial reaction was skepticism. It sounds enormous, maybe even punitive. But let's walk through the math, because these numbers aren't arbitrary. Start with the original acquisition cost, $3.9 billion in cash. That's documented, verified, public record. Now add the subsequent investments. Over the 6 years following the acquisition, Wingtech didn't just maintain Nexperia, they expanded it. New production lines were built, technology was upgraded, global operations were extended, research and development budgets increased, supply chain integration deepened. Conservative estimates place these additional investments at over $1 billion. Then there's the increase in enterprise value. Between the time of acquisition and the moment the Dutch government intervened, Nexperia's market position, customer base, and overall valuation had grown substantially. That appreciation represents real value that Chinese investors created and would now lose. Factor in lost future earnings, the destruction of contractual relationships, reputational damage, and the complete disruption of long-term strategic plans, and suddenly $18 billion doesn't look quite so unreasonable. But here's the critical question. If China actually proceeds with international arbitration, what are their chances of winning? From a purely legal standpoint, China's case has merit, potentially significant merit. Multiple independent legal analyses have identified procedural problems with how the Dutch government handled this intervention. Questions have been raised about transparency, about whether sufficient legal justification was provided, about potential violations of multilateral investment treaty obligations. In the world of international investment arbitration, these kinds of procedural deficiencies matter enormously. Governments can't simply seize foreign assets on national security grounds without following established processes and providing substantive evidence. That said, winning an arbitration ruling is one thing. Actually collecting the compensation? That's an entirely different challenge. Consider the case of Spain, a cautionary tale that's directly relevant here. In 2013, the Spanish government retroactively slashed renewable energy subsidies it had previously guaranteed to foreign investors. The move triggered more than 50 international arbitration cases under the Energy Charter Treaty, with total claims exceeding 11 billion euros. Spain lost. Repeatedly, tribunals found clear violations of investment protection obligations. To date, Spain has been ordered to pay more than 1.5 billion euros in confirmed compensation. And yet, many investors still haven't seen their money. In cases like Seizure Infrastructure and Nexperia, Spain has refused to voluntarily enforce arbitration rulings within its own court system. Investors have been forced to pursue asset seizures in third countries, a lengthy, expensive, uncertain process. The same pattern could easily play out here. Even if China wins its arbitration case against the Netherlands, and the odds aren't bad, actually recovering the full $18 billion would be extraordinarily difficult. Realistically, Beijing might collect a fraction of the claimed amount, or reach some negotiated settlement that falls well short of the original demand. But here's what matters more than the money: the signal it sends. For decades, European countries, and the Netherlands in particular, have marketed themselves as safe, stable, predictable destinations for foreign investment. The rule of law, respect for property rights, transparent regulatory frameworks. These weren't just talking points, they were the foundation of Europe's appeal to global capital. What happens when a government seizes a lawfully acquired company worth nearly $15 billion, removes its management, and demands the forced transfer of ownership for virtually nothing? It creates doubt, and in international investment markets, doubt is poison. Chinese investors will obviously take note. But so will investors from Japan, South Korea, the Middle East, North America, anyone who might have previously considered the Netherlands a reliable partner for long-term capital deployment. Even if the Netherlands never pays a cent in arbitration damages, the reputational cost could dwarf any financial liability. Because the next time a major investment opportunity arises, sophisticated investors will remember. This is a country where the rules can change overnight, where approved transactions can be retroactively unwound, where property rights are apparently negotiable. And here's the deeper irony. This entire crisis stems from concerns about economic security. But by undermining confidence in its own investment framework, the Netherlands may have done more damage to its economic security than any foreign ownership arrangement ever could. So where does this leave us? The Dutch government faces a choice, and the clock is ticking. They have 6 months to resolve this crisis before China initiates formal arbitration proceedings. 6 months to decide whether defending this intervention is worth the potential cost, not just in financial terms, but in credibility, reputation, and future investment flows. For China, this case represents something larger than one company or one $18 billion claim. It's a test of whether international investment rules actually mean anything when geopolitics gets involved. It's a question of whether Chinese companies can genuinely integrate into global markets, or whether they'll always remain vulnerable to politically motivated expropriation. And for the rest of us watching this unfold, it's a reminder that the chip war everyone talks about isn't just about technology. It's about trust, about property rights, about whether the international economic system can survive when national security concerns override every other consideration. The Nexperia case isn't just a dispute between China and the Netherlands, it's a precedent being set in real time, one that will echo through boardrooms, government ministries, and investment committees around the world for years to come. The question isn't just whether China will get its $18 billion. The question is what kind of global economic order we're building and whether anyone will want to invest in it. What do you think? Is this a legitimate national security intervention or economic plunder dressed up in regulatory language? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and if you found this breakdown valuable, make sure you subscribe and hit that notification bell, because this story is far from over, and we'll be tracking every development as it unfolds. See you in the next one.